In the smothering shadows of Ashgrove, a tale of justice unleashed. In the suffocating shadows of a small-town courtroom, a black woman stood alone. Her wrists were cuffed in front of her, her spine straight despite the weight of iron and prejudice. Across from her sat a sea of sneering white cops, their laughter sharp as broken glass. They thought they had her pinned. They thought they had won, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. This wasn't some petty criminal on trial for a crime she didn't commit. This was Valerie Cross, the acting director of Homeland Security. The calm in her eyes hid the storm gathering behind them, and when it broke, it would drown them all. Every secret they had buried, every lie they had told, every life they had destroyed, it was all about to come crashing down. Justice was about to get loud. Before we get into it, if you love stories where the underdog flips the script and corruption gets what's coming, don't forget to subscribe. It's the best way to stay up to date on every twist and turn as soon as it drops. Now, let's get into it. The Greyhound bus sighed to a stop at the edge of Ashgrove, a nowhere town forgotten by time. The sky hung low and gray, and the November wind clawed through every crack. Valerie Cross stepped off the bus, her boots crunching against gravel iced over in the night. A duffel bag, scuffed and faded, hung from her shoulder. She tugged her hood lower over her face as she walked into town. To anyone watching, she was just another drifter with tired eyes and nowhere to be. But Valerie wasn't just anyone. She was a ghost in the machine, a CIA operative turned head of a covert task force whose missions didn't officially exist. And for 6 months, she'd run Homeland Security's most secretive division. 30 years earlier, Ashgrove had taken something from her, a father who had been framed by dirty cops. They called it a heart attack. She'd known better. And now, at 42, she was back. Not as a grieving daughter, as a predator. Her target was Colton Briggs, the town's golden boy deputy who'd inherited his badge and arrogance from his father. If her intel was right, he'd also inherited his old man's corruption. 30 years ago, the Briggs family had crushed her father beneath planted evidence and whispered lies. Now, they were bleeding the town dry with bribes and fear. Valerie was here to rip them out by the roots. Ashgrove's town hall was a relic of better days, chipped bricks and faded flags. A job posting had brought her here, part-time records clerk, no questions asked. The perfect cover. She slid her forged ID across the desk. Veronica Kane, no middle initial, and the board receptionist barely glanced up. She stamped it and waved her toward a pile of files. "Start with those," the woman muttered. "And don't expect a parade." Valerie smiled faintly, sliding into the chair with practiced ease. She flipped through the yellowed records with steady hands. But her eyes, sharp and watchful, scanned the room, exits, cameras, faces. She wasn't here to shuffle papers. She was here to find the rot and follow it to its source. Her first move? Dig into the town's records and find the threads that tied Colton Briggs to both the past and the present. She had been at it for less than 10 minutes when the front doors slammed open. 3 men strode in, their boots heavy on the cracked linoleum. Colton led the pack, tall, broad-shouldered, with a smirk carved from smugness. His badge gleamed on his chest like he'd earned it, which he hadn't. New blood, Colton drawled, his southern twang slick with condescension. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Valerie didn't flinch. She played her role, her voice soft. "Veronica Kane." He stepped closer, his cologne a sour cloud. "Kane, huh? You don't look like you belong here." Buzzcut, his sidekick Officer Gage, chuckled. "She's got that deer-in-the-headlights look, boss. Bet she's running from something." The stocky one, chewing tobacco, spat into a styrofoam cup. "Or maybe she's hunting something." Colton plucked a file from her desk, pretending to read it before tossing it back with a smirk. Papers scattered across the floor. "Oops. Better clean that up, darling. Wouldn't want the boss to think you're sloppy." They laughed, hard, barking sounds. Valerie knelt, gathering the papers slowly, calmly. She didn't react. She didn't rise to the bait. But under her coat, a recorder hummed silently, capturing every word, every sneer. The files revealed patterns, names that kept popping up, dates that didn't line up, The same families. The same lies. She found her father's name in a long-forgotten folder, Thomas Cross. Case closed. Evidence destroyed. A red line scrawled across the page. Destroyed? No. Burned. Buried. By someone named Briggs. And Valerie would unbury it all. Carl Mason was the night guard at Town Hall, an old man with sharp eyes and a slow gait. Valerie didn't know if he was friend or foe, but when he found her one night deep in the archives, he didn't raise an alarm. Instead, he poured coffee into a chipped mug and watched her over the rim. Folks don't dig through 30-year-old files just to catch up, Carl said. You're looking for someone. I like to know where I am, she replied. His gaze lingered. Ashgrove's full of dead ends. I knew a man once, good man. Got caught in one. Never made it out. Thomas Cross. Her father. She was sure of it. But Carl said nothing else that night. He just nodded and left her to the dark. As the days passed, Valerie found more. A kid named Marcus Hale, 19 years old, shot dead 2 months ago in what was called a botched arrest. The witnesses had changed their stories after a visit from Colton Briggs. His signature scrawled carelessly at the bottom of the reports. Valerie took pictures, notes, evidence, and then the patrol car started showing up outside Town Hall late at night. Colton called her into his office one morning. His grin was wide as ever. We like things quiet here, he told her. No one likes a snoop. She played timid. Let him think he had her scared. But inside, she was coiling tighter. Carl found her at the diner 2 nights later. He slid a USB drive across the table. Logged from the station, he said. Stuff they thought I erased. Valerie closed her hand over it. Why now? Because I'm tired of watching good people get eaten alive, Carl said. Your daddy was one of them. The next night, a message appeared on her burner phone. Station. Midnight. Come alone. It was a trap. Of course it was. But Valerie went anyway. They planted drugs in her car, just like they had with her father. Colton and his men arrested her, laughing as they cuffed her. Travis, his wiry henchman, sneered as he shoved her into the cell. But they didn't take her recorder. She picked the cuffs, crawled into the vent, hid the evidence, and when they dragged her into court the next morning, expecting her to beg for mercy, she stood tall. She played the recording. Colton's voice filled the courtroom. Planned it tonight, same as the old days. Your daddy be proud. The room erupted. Carl stood up with the USB. I've got more, he said. The judge slammed his gavel. Colton and Travis were arrested on the spot. Valerie looked Colton in the eye as they dragged him away. I'm not Veronica Kane, she said. I'm Valerie Cross, and I just tore your kingdom apart. Ashgrove reeled in the days that followed. The corruption ran deep beyond Colton, beyond the town. The feds found links to bigger networks. Valerie had cracked the dam, and a flood was coming. Carl stayed behind to help rebuild. Danny Reyes, the rookie cop who'd passed her the note, was stepping up. Valerie stood by her father's grave one last time. She laid a single white rose on the stone. I got them, she whispered. As she drove away from Ashgrove, Langley was calling. A new case. A new war. She didn't answer. Not yet. Tomorrow, she would fight again. But today was for Thomas Cross. And that's the end of Valerie Cross's battle, for now. What did you think of her fight for justice? Drop a comment below, and let me know where you're tuning in from. New York? Texas? Maybe somewhere across the globe? Your voice keeps these stories alive. If you want more tales where truth takes the stage, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.